The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor, Joshua Shigala from the Standard.io,
What goes up must come down and go back up again.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1. Bitcoin Lightning Network misses block after enormous multi-sig transaction. A validation bug caused by a complex multi-sig transaction temporarily disrupted a popular implementation of Bitcoin's Lightning Network. The transaction had more than 900 different transactions inside of it. It was a 998 of 999 multi-sig transaction featuring 998 private key signatures to authenticate the transaction, an enormously complex and unusual task. Dan Eve, are you with us? What do you think about the Lightning Network missing a block?
Thank you. Sorry, technical difficulties there. It seems like a pretty big test, right, of the multi-sig. I'm wondering. I'm sure that's probably the first time that they've had 998 out of 999 multi-sig, or even close to that, because it's quite a big technical setup. So, what's impressive is the fact that even though it did miss a block, which is obviously bad, is that now they resolved it, and now you can actually do. Someone's proven now that they've got the fix out there already. That you can do a 998 out of 999, which is huge, right? I'm not sure what the limitation for Ethereum is, but on like Stellar, it's something like 20. I mean, I couldn't find the information when I was trying to search for it, but it just goes to show how. And this was using tap, right? So that it's obviously using new technology. It's obviously just being or in the process of evolving, and they're still going to be finding issues. Lightning's still considered kind of experimental, and so there's still a kind of people disclaimer Lightning with don't put too much funds on it, even though it's still growing very steadily. So what's good is the reaction time of how quick they are able to patch it up and fix it. And the impact wasn't it wasn't as big as it could have been, right? It wasn't the fact that people lost funds. They didn't lose funds. They did miss a block. It did stall things in the network. But it's a good lesson that's learned and patched quite quickly. So I think it's at the end of the day, it is experimental. Don't put too much money in Lightning Network. It is a growing technology, and there will be issues like this. It just needs to go through these little pain phases to help with wider adoption, to make it more resilient.
Joshua Shigala.
I would be interested to see what happened to Lightning Core from Blockstream and the other one, Iconic. I can never pronounce that one, but what happened to those implementations? And this is the beautiful thing about having implementations, is that you can disrupt one without disrupting the whole lot. So only part of the network was out of sync for a little bit, and really, like Dan said, it was a nice test of having a anti-fragile system work. So it broke it. What I'd like to see is, how do you stop someone just making, I don't know, a million transaction sort of multi-sig? Where do you stop? Because once you can programmatically do it, it'll really, where's the limit? So
it does seem like they should put some kind of a cap on it. Like Dan said, if they fixed it for $9.99, that's great. But what about 1,000? What about 1,500? Like Josh is saying, it's pretty easy. Someone's going to keep doing this until they break the Lightning Network. This could be a permanent problem unless they put some kind of a temporary cap, even if they raise it in the future.
I mean, what's great about it, if you really look at it, it was 998 out of 999 multi-sig, right? And it only cost $4.20 in fees. I mean, that's extraordinarily cheap for so many transactions. So it's funny now that Ethereum's just, we're in la la land with Ethereum, where people are used to like $20 transactions, because people used to scream and shout about $5 transactions on Bitcoin, and that's come down a lot. I mean, Ethereum's come down a lot as well since then, but that's generally because the network's a little bit less active now with the bear market. But yeah, extraordinary. $4.90 or 60 or something for that many transactions is absolutely wonderful.
But imagine if Ethereum could do I don't know if it can, but if it could do 909 multi-sig, that would cost an insane amount. It would cost, it's an unfathomable amount, especially if, there were times where I was interacting with crazy, like little random protocols for stablecoin staking and stuff like that. And it was like $1,000 if you wanted to do it. $1,000 a transaction, which is literally insane. $1 million. So imagine that on a multi-sig as well, like of that level. The cost would be crazy. So I think it's a testament to how actually cheap and efficient the Lightning Network is.
Yeah,
it's also interesting the way that Ethereum does their fees. You get used to paying them. So you just kind of push the button automatically. And if you have a large account with, like, say, a couple $1,000s in there and you get the wrong fee calculation, you could spend $1,000 on fees or worse by just pushing the wrong button. So always be careful when you're sending a transaction to check how much the fee is before you complete the transaction. This is a great time for everybody to like the show. It's the beginning of the show. We're still probably hot like Mr. Beast. Everybody's liking and subscribing. I can see the action in the chat box. Josh is so excited he dropped his connection. Well, let's move on to the exit question. Is this Lightning Network, is it a worse bug or is it worse news? That is to say, is it technically bad? Does it hurt the network, or is it just bad news? It hurts the profile of Lightning. Dan, Eve?
I think it's good news. It shows the resilience of Lightning, and as Josh said, just because LND went down, there's other implementations of it. So there hasn't been any news on those issues with those implementations. So the fact that it was patched so quickly, the main news really is that like any bit of software that gets rolled out, you have bugs, you fix them. It's the long-lasting effects that are the problems, and there doesn't seem to be a long-lasting, there's no, this is an unfixable event, or this will take a long time to kind of implement something else to kind of work around. It was patched quickly and it worked, and it was cheap ultimately based on the significance of the size of the transaction. So I think this is nothing but good news.
Joshua Shigala, is it a worse bug or is it worse news? No, I'd have to totally agree with that. It's just a bad news day. It's actually, nothing really major happened, and it's good.
They only missed one block. Come on, no big deal. Moving on to issue 2. Issue 2, Bitcoin reverses lower after Thursday's big rally, but remains in the $19,000 level. Cryptocurrencies continued to climb on Friday as investors sought to extend the previous day's rally. Bitcoin was lower by 1% at 19,286 and gained almost 1%. Gained 1% to trade at around 1,299. Both assets are on pace for their 4th down week in the last 5. Joshua Shigala, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies this week?
I mean, I've just been so busy working on the standard that I haven't really kept up, and sometimes it's up and down. It just seems like it's moving sideways in that sort of 20 to 19 range, and I don't know. Like, what do you guys think? Have we hit? Are we circling the bottom? I guess it's more about other economic influences at this point, because I feel like this is the sort of natural bottom for Bitcoin and the crypto market as a whole. But I feel like external events like the Ukraine Russia thing and stuff like that are really what's sort of influencing the price, as well as as well as inflation rates and things like this.
Well, if it seems like we've done this story before, it's because we've done this story before. Just today, when I was trying to get a headline for this story, I Google searched the article header to get the original headline and picked an article from a month ago that said almost the same thing. Bitcoin stuck at 20K, nothing happening. Why is Bitcoin so boring? And I think, like Josh said, it's the same thing. People still see it as a risk asset. So when external forces like the Ukraine war, the gas heating crisis, energy crisis, all of these things, inflation, are affecting the normal markets, the normal market people put their money in Bitcoin. They see it as a risk. They pull right out.
Yeah.
I went to the Web3 conference this week in Las Vegas at the Wynn, and I got to hear many speeches by Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. And it was almost like I time traveled through a DeLorean that they also had at the conference. And Mr. Wonderful brings you information from 2014 or 15. He says what Bitcoin needs to go forward is regulation. That's right. Regulation again. And these are the greatest experts that the other spaces have to offer.
No, my God.
So what do you think, Josh? Regulation, is that going to bring in the money?
Yeah, this is what annoys me about a lot of crypto events is all of a sudden, especially the big ones like the Miami ones, they just bring out all of these people that are all of a sudden experts in crypto. And they're just talking heads from the old school world. They have nothing. And then they don't invite like people that have been there forever and can actually give insights because they've evolved with the thing. So these new talking heads just bring up the same rubbish, like you mentioned, Thomas, it's not rubbish, it's good stuff, but it's the same stuff we've been saying since 2014, 13, 12. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I do feel that one of the big things that people really don't get, and especially on the left, is that there's this love of just regulation. They just think regulation is something that's gonna just be perfect. It's not a problem. Just regulate it. Get the government to regulate. I've heard people say, absolutely regulate the internet. You're like, what? The same entity that brought us, lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the same entity that brought us into constant wars and like, you can't just say regulation. It makes zero sense. It's stupid. It's a stupid comment.
I think what's interesting is regulation wouldn't solve our current problem, right? Our current problem is all the day traders, the people who were, think it's a risk asset, pulled their money out. So if we were regulated, we'd still be addicted to their money and we'd still be judged by their standards. If they still see this as a risk asset, then they're just pulling in and out with larger amounts of money, with larger institutions pulling in and out.
Yeah, and
changing their minds about
that are
proof of stake, proof of work, whether it's a store of value or whether it's a currency or all these things, the store of value versus transactional and speculatory. That's where we need to change their mind. And that's a larger thing that I think the halvening cycle itself is just going to take care of it. I was thinking about what's the best advertisement, what's the best like little short paragraph I could give you about Bitcoin that would make you, calm down about the price, especially if you were just a normal person at this big fancy convention. And I was like, well, in about 2 years and about every 4 years in general, the amount of Bitcoin being produced will go down by 50%. And this is not a political promise. This is not a hopeful thinking. This is programmatically, and it's hard to change. It'll go down by 50%. So there's only 21 million. It's locked in as a collectible, and they're making less of them all the time.
The thing is, though, with that, the more you think about it, but the more I think about it, I think it's going to be, the halvening is more about the hype around it and less around the actual halvening event itself. Because, back when you went from 50 Bitcoin to 25 in 2012, the supply was about 10 million Bitcoin. And that was, insanely significant as the daily amount of Bitcoin being mined as a percentage of the total supply. It was significant. Whereas by the time we do the halvening in 2024, it's going to be, I think, 19 plus million, and we're going from 6.25 to 3.125 or something like that. So whilst the halvening is still an event where we can say by the law of mathematics that it will be halved, I think the impact is less about the choking of supply, because there's a much larger supply out there, but it's going to be more around the actual hype cycle of it. It's more around, the getting in the news again, and rather than the actual impact of the choking of supply on the markets. You could argue that
I disagree.
It's a good debate, man. I think that if you go by the numbers, it's clear that there's less of an impact by the halvening, but I do think that it's going to rely more on a hype cycle than just the supply being choked off. I mean, you could say that one of the reasons against that is because of the fact that there's more Bitcoin that's lost by then, or that the HODL culture has grown by then. So, if it's 20% of people hodling for 5 years plus now, then it could be 50% by then. And therefore you're choking the supply more because of the circulating supply. But ultimately, the actual numbers will say.
But for instance, the HODL culture, right? That's a variable that's not mathematically solid. So
no.
So, especially with oil going up and inflation and people desperately needing to pay stuff, you can have a HODL culture all you want, but if there's no food on the table, you're not hodling.
Yeah.
And especially because
you need a baby.
If you're really into hodling, you start to try to do it at 100%, right? You try to get all your money into there so that you're getting the maximum benefit. And when trouble strikes from the outside that you can't predict, like heating, energy crisis, food problems, food prices, inflation, they're going to have to sell. I think Josh is right. I think there are a couple of people who will notice the amount of Bitcoin going down. It won't be normal people like us. It'll be people at the Binance trading desk, at the Coinbase trading desk, where previously they were able to easily source tens or hundreds of Bitcoin, and that's going to go down with each one of these halvenings, and that these people are going to notice that the market's not quite what it used to be. And then this information, this idea might spread to others. They might start storing up and stocking more Bitcoin, making these people's job even harder. So I think those are the people that we need to target and understand and realize is that it's just a supply issue. And it's also that people don't understand the two things that we're talking about here, that there are 21 million Bitcoins, it's programmatically hard to change, and that the halvening structure reduces the number of Bitcoins being made by 50% on average every 4 years until the 21 million are made.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's it. They don't know that.
What I think Dan was alluding to, which I agree with him on, is that a lot of the that stuff is priced in, right? Whereas the hype isn't really priced in. But what we've seen in the past is actually the Bitcoin price doesn't go up that much just before the halvening. Usually after, like about 2-3 months after the halvening, is when we start to go off into the next bull run. So yeah, it's a bit of everything, I think.
I'm going to predict a change. I think we're going to go off beforehand this time. I think this time the media is there. The information is starting to get out there. They'll start writing the articles. I think this could be the halvening that everyone always thought they'd see. Go ahead, Dan.
That's a good point. The fact that it is delayed, isn't it? Like it's always been slightly delayed. That the hype happens and the halvening happens, and there's almost a bit of an anticlimax where the price does nothing, like for a while. And then a couple of months after, as you said, it literally then it really pumps, right? But it's almost like it takes the all the hype on the way up to the halvening is sowing the seed, right? It's like sowing the seed, and then everyone's like, it dips a little bit, and maybe that's kind of about the psychology of it. Once it dips a bit because there's an anticlimax, then everyone says, oh, now I'm going to go in because the halvening's over. It had a little mini pump up to the halvening. It's gone down again. Now it's a good buy price. So that's I think that kind of plays into it as well. The fact that it will dip up, it kind of dips afterwards and it doesn't go up immediately. And that's because people are stocking up, ready for, it's not like the normal news cycle, right? Which is buy the rumor, sell the news. It's almost like it almost stagnates a bit and then boom,
The
Oh, a couple
I
of months
still
after.
I still can't believe the position of these people at these trading desks. It's like the ants and the grasshopper, right? The ants are stocking up all this seeds. The grasshopper's sitting around. The ants keep stocking it up. They're like, the rain is coming, the rain is coming. And then the halvening comes and the Bitcoin dry up just like they said. And maybe it doesn't happen right away. Maybe it takes longer or whatever. But from a supply perspective, the ants are always right in Bitcoin. The grasshoppers are always wrong. The supply is always
Is
going
that
down. Is
is
that the
that
right
the
animals? I don't know.
oh, I was going to say, is that an Americanism?
I think it's an
usually it's like
Aesop's fail.
this
Aesop's fail.
this okay, because I noticed the squirrel storing nuts for the winter. It's like, oh yeah, the squirrel's got the nuts for the winter, and so the story is that there's a good squirrel and a bad squirrel. The good squirrel stores all his nuts for the winter, and then the bad squirrel's got nothing because he squanders it, pisses it up against the wall, banging loads of squirrel prostitutes, all sorts of stuff, crazy things going on, crazy things going on. And then he goes, it's like freezing cold. He's got no nuts. He's literally nut dry. And then the other squirrel saves him. And I'm like, don't teach that to kids in the school. Tell them that the squirrel died. Say, oh, the squirrel, he died outside in the cold because he didn't save his nuts for the winter. He was too reckless. That's the true moral, I think. But maybe it's a bit too extreme for kids.
No, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of, it's like the Three Little Pigs as well. You know, it's all about preparing, being prepared. And actually the pigs get slaughtered if they don't prepare by the wolf.
Yeah, which is the same analogy, of course, of proof of stake. And the little pig with the straw thing going, no, you may have a brick house which has got loads more resources, requires more resources to actually secure yourself. But come to my straw house. Come to my straw house of proof of stake. And
only a Bitcoiner can come up with that analogy.
There we go. Proof of stake is like the Three Little Pigs. It does look like it comes from the ant and the grasshopper, from Aesop's fables. The situation is about moral lessons and the virtues of hard work and planning for the future. Depends whether or not they do save the grasshopper at the end. People are talking about the debate over compassion and charity, and also people seeing the grasshopper as an artist and then reinterpreting the fable that way. So it is an interesting fable that continues to this day. But we must move on to the exit question, which is, of course, the price of Bitcoin competing against the predictor of all predictors, the Bitcoin 8-ball. Dan, Eve, is the price going higher or lower this time next week?
I'm going to slight diversion then back, but just to point out that the difficulty right now, so all the price is stagnating a bit. Everyone's kind of going, oh, Bitcoin up, Bitcoin down, blah, 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 blah. But the fact is that right now the hash rate is at, according to BitInfo charts, 268.997 exahashes, which is the highest ever. And the difficulty is 35.6 trillion, which means that there are more miners mining, well, not necessarily more miners, but there is more hash power on the network than ever before. So even though the price has stagnated, what hasn't stagnated is, one, as we also always say, the infrastructure, and two, the miners mining and securing the network, making it even more so the most secure network on earth, with bricks and steel instead of straw stake. So
historically, everyone knows, as Max Kaiser would say, that the hash rate follows the price follows the hash rate. But that doesn't answer the question, Dan, Eve, higher or lower?
I'm going down, even though that's contradictory in everything. I just think it's still down a little bit first.
Well, it must be somebody's birthday. It can't be everyone's unbirthday. Joshua Shigala, higher or lower?
I think this week Bitcoin will experience a little uptick in its value.
Oh, it's a mixed panel. We have pessimism and optimism, but the ball knows all. We'll shake the ball, which may cause bubbles. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Not likely. Not likely. The ball is pessimistic.
Ominous.
Great time for everybody to give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. It helps the YouTube algorithm find the show. You can also put in a comment or a chat. Let us know what you thought. Do you think the halvening is going to save Bitcoin? Or do you think we need regulation, regulation, and regulation? Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got links to the podcasts, all the shows. On the left-hand side here, you can see how many shows people have appeared in, and we have an update from the competition. Tone Vase has appeared in approximately 152 shows. These are just the ones he's been tagged in. Dan Eve is catching up at 117, just 40 shows behind. Meanwhile, Joshua Shigala has just passed 100 shows tagged in on the network, could be more, and has passed Jimmy Song at 94. And these are just tagged episodes. You can check out all these episodes at worldcryptonetwork.com. Hundreds of episodes. Moving on to issue 3, Coin Center is suing OFAC over its Tornado Cash sanction. Coin Center, along with a group of privacy-seeking workers, donors, activists, and public figures, filed a lawsuit against the Treasury Department, demanding that privacy be normalized, delisting Tornado Cash privacy tools from sanctions, and enjoining the Treasury Department from enforcing against ordinary Americans exercising their self-evident and basic rights to privacy. Joshua Shigala, what do you think about Coin Center's action and the Tornado Cash situation?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important suit. I think when I first heard about it, I retweeted it halfway through the week and got very, very happy about that, because someone needs to take these guys to task. So basically what happened, one guy, he got a whole bunch of dust from the Tornado Cash stuff, because some guy that had a whole bunch of transactions basically dusted heaps of big wallets. And now this guy is like, basically has to spend a month every 6 months or something like that, getting himself out of issues with stuff because of that. So he's like, life's too short. This is bull dust. I'm going to have to take these guys to court. And I think it's wonderful. And then Coin Center joining on top for the OFAC lawsuit. I think it's great. More power to you. I'd love to, I really want to keep up with this story. I think it's great.
Dan Eve, your thoughts on Tornado Cash?
It's crazy that they could just sanction a smart contract. It's I know that obviously in normal law you could be under suspicion of a crime that you're not actually the criminal, but you still have your assets confiscated briefly. But usually, at least, that's done in a slightly targeted way, right? That there's usually some evidence behind it. There's a reason to pick you specifically, yada yada yada. But this tarring a smart contract with the brush of like criminals and terrorists and stuff is just insanity. And it's also, it's just a shotgun approach. It's not even a shotgun approach. It's just like a nuclear approach, right? It's like not being targeted. It's like the opposite of what you do when you build a case for someone specifically. It's
such an overreach. It's a lazy, sick little overreach. They're like, these people, and it goes to show that they don't even understand the crypto culture, like how many people depend on this invention that's happened and self-evolved out of the people for so long. Like these things, they don't understand that normal people have livelihoods tied up in this, and they're just like, this little weird thing that North Korea might have used once. There you go.
Well, and I think the problem is a greater misunderstanding where they don't understand how internet culture works as well. They found this guy relatively easily. He was developing this relatively publicly. And what they've shown us is, don't do that. The next time this comes out, it won't be a public developer. It won't be a public project. It won't be easy to find. And this is because they're teaching people this lesson now. And like Josh says, and he's angry about, they've gone full draconian. They're taking away all your privacy. They've started again with, how much privacy should you have? Well, we're starting at 0 instead of starting at 100. So they've gone from the wrong direction, and they're trying to limit a new technology, and they're going to fail. And that's another thing they don't understand, is by drawing this much attention to it, by teaching this many developers that You develop your projects in private next time, buddies. Like, don't let them find you. And that's going to be even harder to control next time.
More OPSEC, it just teaches people more OPSEC. But the fact is that that there's many, they gave a bunch of like innocent reasons, right? Like the best example is the fact that they said that when you get paid, right, it goes into your bank account. No one can see what your bank account is. No other employees, they can't see your funds or whatever. If you apply this analogy to the real world, it's the equivalent of people, all your colleagues being able to see who's being paid what and where your money is going. And that's not how the world is built around it. So you need to have these protections in smart contract land, because the money's really traceable on Ethereum. Obviously, it's a bit different when you use different services mixers or whatever, and that's the reason why you have them, because you don't want people knowing exactly how much you get paid, because it makes you a target for all sorts of various things. Even if it's they said about the donations to whatever cause it is. But even if it's just someone who's a competitor who wants to screw you over in some way, it could be anything. It could be someone who knows what the pay address is for employees of Coinbase or whatever, for example, and they want to go after these people. They want to find out where they're spending money.
Especially when you consider public addresses and people who maybe take donations, who have a public address out there. If you as a negative actor could just take a bunch of dirty dollars, put dirty dollars in each one of the public addresses that you disagree with politically, now you've poisoned their accounts and they can no longer use this network. That doesn't make any sense. Everyone knows the story, and it's not a folk story, but it is real, how every dollar bill in Washington DC has cocaine on it, so on and so forth. This kind of thing. If we're just going to take digital money and assume that it's all dirty, well, unfortunately, I believe it's all dirty. Like, not just some of it, but it's all dirty. Even the money that Mr. Wonderful has, that he got from his Bitcoin miners who used eco-friendly energy and mined it directly, like, it still touched the other nodes. It touched the other networks. Like, if we're going to start tainting money, the whole system seems tainted. Yeah. But maybe we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on. Here we are, issue 3. Moving on to issue 4. To hodl or have kids. The IVF Bitcoin babies paid for with Bitcoin profits. And this is a fun story. A Bitcoiner in London brings new meaning to the phrase generational wealth. Noodle sold some Bitcoin to pay for IVF treatments for 2 babies. And the article goes into far too much depth on IVF treatment and what it is and so forth. But let's assume the man bought some babies. Also, I think it's an interesting chance to discuss if there's going to be a Bitcoin baby boom, if the price jumping up to 60K led to some happy babies that are going to be popping out here probably in the last 3 months or so, in that kind of range. And just in general, this idea of, are people holding Bitcoin and not having families? And is this a good idea? Or should people be having families and spending money and living their lives? Dan, Eve, what do you think? Bitcoin babies, and also about the guy's decision. He sold Bitcoin to pay for these children. Is this going to be something you regret? You're like, damn you, 0.1, and you, 0.12. I could have had so much more than you. Go ahead, Dan. What do you think about
what's
Bitcoin
incredible,
babies?
What's incredible is that we've come so far from saying, Bitcoin can't be cashed out, you can't use it for anything, it's only used for nefarious purposes, blah 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 blah, and then now people are using it for IVF treatment. And that's what's so awesome, is that it can be cashed out and it can be used for things that you need. Now, whilst it's nice to hodl and everyone wants to hodl, ultimately you have things you need to pay for in reality. And until Bitcoin spreads enough that the IVF treatment place accepts Bitcoin, or your local tax office accepts Bitcoin, which very few do in the world still, you still got to cash out. Like, it's all good to kind of to point the finger and be like, oh, you sold your Bitcoin, but ultimately you need to live, right? Unfortunately, not everyone accepts Bitcoin. And even the local loan sharks, they'll still come and break your legs because you haven't given them fiat in untraceable or quite untraceable fiat paper money. They'll still break your legs because even if you've got this Bitcoin thing, ultimately you've got to sell out when you need to. People need money to live and fiat money to live. And until Bitcoin really proliferates around and becomes completely ubiquitous, used for every service, you're going to need to sell out. In terms of regretting to pay for babies, I think no way you're going to have a baby. And babies are kind of cool and funny and cuddly, and although they shit all over the place and drool over everything, they're really nice things to have, and they're more physical than Bitcoin, right? You can be like, oh, I can't hold my 0.1 Bitcoin. I could recite the 12 words that doth Bitcoin is held in, for example, but I can't hold it and give it a cuddle and say it's a nice cuddly little Bitcoin, because it's not. It's a nice cuddly little baby instead. So I think it's really cool, and it's really an example of people that are cashing out and using it for something that really benefits them in their life. Obviously, there's still a movement that's like, babies are bad for the environment. Anyone who's a baby who is selfish, and but screw those people because babies are kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting and positive story for Bitcoin. I know it's hard for all the hodlers whenever anyone cashes out for anything, but I'm always excited when somebody buys a house, or maybe if they have a sickness and they're able to take care of it or take time off to help a relative or family member. It's times like this where Bitcoin really does come true, and it really helps people. It reminds me a lot of, although I didn't agree with them politically, during the Canadian trucker protests, they used Tallycoin and Bitcoin to an incredible degree to raise a lot of money, to distribute a lot of funds, and to help their movement, which again wouldn't have been possible without Bitcoin. So I'm glad to see it helping babies, helping truckers, helping anybody. It's neat to see them use Bitcoin. And it is unfortunate that they have to cash out. But maybe on this, they could, wire up Coinbase and tell them the story, try to get a refund on the fees. Hey, I cashed those out to get a baby. You should give me a refund on the fees for the good story. That's what you got to do. Joshua Shigala, what do you think about the Bitcoin IVF baby boom?
I'm actually just pissed off that I didn't get a story, because I did the exact same thing for my brother, whose wife had a bit of an issue, and I helped that procedure.
Nice, man.
Just got to get a better press agent, man.
Yeah, I need a better press agent. What the hell? This is old news. Yeah, but yeah, it's good. More kids, it's great. They're the future. They're the way. Peaceful parenting. Read about it. It's important.
Well, and then I think the real smart move at this point is, we were saying maybe they're like a 0.1 or a 0.2, is to put down the same amount of Bitcoin in a savings account for the kids as much as the kids cost. That'd be a fascinating thing to see how that turns out. I think we're running out of time. We're going to go to predictions or story of the week. Dan, Eve, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week?
My prediction is that Bitcoin will go down slightly. I'm doubling down and agreeing with the magic 8 ball that Bitcoin unfortunately will go down slightly because of the turmoil in the rest of the world.
Dan's become one of those triangle people who believes that Bitcoin must see 10K before it can see 100K, which never made any sense
broken,
to me.
So it just flops. It just flops.
That's what the Bitcoin price has been doing lately. Joshua Shigala, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the predictions story of the week is that we're launching the whitelist finally on the standard. We're getting really close. We're all our contracts, the smart contracts have been audited now by Zokyo Labs, pretty much the grandfather of all smart contracting auditors out there. Can't get better than that. And yeah, it's getting really exciting. Although the bear market's a bit of a bummer. But it is what it is. We've just been building, the whole time, but eventually we've got to launch. So the whitelist will have a whole bunch of prizes and bonuses and stuff like that for sharing, and liking and doing little bounties, like joining the Discord and stuff. So all sorts of airdrops and things like that. So go over to the standard.io on Monday. If you're listening to this in the future, and yeah, join the fun.
Well, we're looking forward to it, Josh, and I can tell you that one of the other things that Mr. Wonderful was excited about at the conference, besides, of course, regulation, was stable coins. So I don't know that he's heard about the standard, but I think when he finds out the questionable background of Tether and other things, and that we're keeping dollars in bank accounts and all these kind of not computer trust networks, these untrusted external systems, that perhaps he'll investigate something like the standard that's based on smart contracts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Enforceable.
Like I've actually also wanted to reach out to Peter Shifty, because he's always harped on about how gold and this and that, and part of the standards appeal is that we're allowing tokenized gold to also be used as collateral in these smart contracts, especially in bear markets. It's interesting because what our contracts do is during the bear market, if your collateral is going down, like if your collateral is in Ethereum, it's going down and down, you can auto swap it to a tokenized gold, so that at least it's a little bit untethered from that market. But what I would be interested in what Peter Schiff's take is on like that sort of approach of using Bitcoin or rare numbers and rare metals tokenized. Like I've met Peter a couple of times over my time, and he seems extraordinarily arrogant and hard to talk to, but is what it is.
Well, arrogance, and you can't always forget there's always a possibility of being hypocritical, being a hypocrite, because I think Peter Schiff's name and his altcoin holdings were exposed in the Celsius court filings, allegedly.
Yes.
So it's very interesting to see which one of the original Bitcoin maximalists or Bitcoin haters were just happening to hold on to some altcoins, but that's all in the court filings. Anyone could go look at that. I just want to give a quick shout out to the Web3 conference, W3BX, that I attended this week in Las Vegas at the Wynn Convention Center, the Wynn Hotel. It was a fun conference. This is where I got to see Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, who told me, like from a time traveler from 2015, he was like, regulation, regulation, regulation. And I was the only one laughing. It's kind of fun to go to this. This was a Web3 conference, so it wasn't a Bitcoin or crypto conference. So that means there were girls there, and also companies and money and and like snacks and cookies and free coffee. We all need to go into Web3, crypto, Bitcoin, these labels, Ethereum, these things that we've gotten. They're killing us, right? This is the Web3 network. I mean, because all Web3 seems to be is Bitcoin, NFTs, DAOs, and crypto, but not saying crypto. So nobody said crypto, nobody said Bitcoin.
It was like Bitcoin bad, blockchain good, then blockchain crypto good, then now it's Web3.
That's it. So yes, we all need to change to become Web3 experts. It was a fun, great conference, really huge spaces, tons more space for speakers and tons more space for attendees. So get out there, go to a meetup, go to a conference, meet some people. They even knew about our building thing. They were like, you've got to build during the down times. Yeah. It's amazing to see like these little memes that like Andreas and the rest of the crew out there created to be adopted by these giant speakers. And it was also the conference was pretty well attended, but it was much too large for the number of attendees. So a lot of the speeches seemed really small. Really only Mr. Wonderful had a following. And it was pretty sad because he would go from room to room making speeches and the audience would get up and go with him. So it was sad not many people got a chance to speak or not a chance to be heard and seen. It was very strange. They had James Altucher there, the guy with the curly hair from YouTube, who I think was allegedly promoting some scams a few years ago. But I guess he's fine and he's back now. So it's very strange to see who these people respect. And like Josh said, it's very strange. Obviously, in the audience, no one recognizes me anymore, which is fine, and that's great. But what was interesting, as Josh said, is we really do have institutional knowledge going back to 2013 when these people mocked and laughed at us. Yeah. And now these same people have overnight changed their minds and now are trusted on this thing that just a few years ago, when we were, being very public and very out there that we liked Bitcoin, we thought it was important. These people who mocked and laughed at us are now still ruling everything despite being completely wrong.
Completely
so you have to
wrong.
wonder,
Just
are they going to be
experts.
wrong in the future? Like, why would you get their advice? Like, just because they have status and standing with CNBC, because they're on Shark Tank. It was just very interesting to see whose advice was valued and whose was not. Yeah. And I don't, how long will this last? This imbalance.
Hey,
if you're taking advice from somebody who says Bitcoin is a failed experiment, you need to sack yourself and them, because it's obviously not a failed experiment. Like it's one of those things that people will argue black is white, or white is black, or blue is green, and you're just like, but it's the evidence is there. It's blue, or it's green, it's not blue, or whichever way around it is. But the fact is that it's definitely not a failed experiment. That's for sure. Well,
I was also reminded of kind of like a goodwill hunting factor here, where these people are paying $900 a seat, and it was a beautiful 4-day conference. There's a lot of speakers. It's probably a good deal for $900, but a lot of money for something that they could probably get on YouTube for free. Right? They could probably get this education, $5 in late fees at the library, whereas they're coming to this conference. No offense to these people, but not even knowing what an NFT is, which is great. But you could just do the research first. Then you could go to the conference. Then you could ask the people in the industry, like, what is an NFT going to be tomorrow? Or what is a valuable NFT? Or which NFT category should I get into? It just seems like that goodwill hunting.
Regulation.
Goodwill hunting quote.
Just regulation. I just want to put a big shout out to Proper Goal. He they're here every week. Props there. Really, thanks a lot for your support. Really, really cool. And also, Crypto Cleanse, thanks a lot for being here. We wouldn't do the show without at least two of you. And so it's awesome. And remember to hit the like, subscribe, smash the. Actually, tell your friends, like, tweet about it. Don't just people here share, but they
well, and you could put it on Reddit too. We haven't been on Reddit in a long time. I think the Reddit Bitcoin group is much bigger than it used to be. There's ways to promote this, but this is kind of a laid back discussion group with long format topics. This isn't really hot content. We're not predicting the price. We don't have the triangles, but but we're working on it.
We are wafflers as well. We like to add unnecessary detail. This is like, if this was a podcast, a superhero podcast about Bitcoin, it would be superfluous, as in superfluous, which is like the normal stuff, but a bit extra that may not be necessary. So that's it. That's the tagline.
Nice.
Well, everyone wants to be an influencer, but maybe not a superfluous one. But I think we're running out of time. Thanks to everybody for thumbs up and subscribing. Dan and Josh for being on the show, and Martine and Ben and everybody else who's always on the show. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye.
Bye.